Hello, kids. How are you all? I hope all of you are healthy, all of you are positive, and all of you are making the best of this particular time. Welcome back to my channel, Let's Learn Together. And in today's video, I'm trying to discuss with you the story, the plot, the characters, and the themes of the second chapter of the English textbook Vistas, which happens to be The Tiger King, which is written by Kalki Krishnamurti. Now, before actually I move on to the contents of this particular video, I hope and I presume that all of you have read the story, since most of you have answered some of the very basic questions that I had sent out to you on the group. So I'm hoping that most of you know the story. If you do not, then well, after listening to this particular video, it is recommended that you go back to the chapter and read the chapter line by line, or rather, as we say, that you should go through the story by reading it between the lines. Okay, so this is extremely important, and being one of the most senior classes of the school, you must learn to come prepared before actually taking a class, be it online or offline. Okay, so I hope that all of you have read the story. However, if you have not, please go through it once you have watched this particular video. So today's content of the videos are going to be, first of all, I'll try to discuss the story with you, and as the story is moving on, I'll keep on discussing various issues that keep coming up with that particular point, or with that particular point of the story or in the narration. So you are requested to keep, as usual, a pencil and a notebook with you, so that you can take notes as I'm talking to you, because it will be then easier for you to go through the notes later on, right? So, first of all, let me begin with you with the fact that this particular story, Tiger King, has been written by Kalki Krishnamurthy, who is very much an Indian English writer. I would have talked to you in this, about this genre of Indian English writer in variety of different classes that we have had earlier, wherein I have talked to you about what is it that this particular genre is all about. Indian English writing, as the name itself suggests to you, it is basically those writers who are native of India but have chosen a foreign language to write their fiction or to write their poetry or drama, whatever genre they're writing. But the important point is that they have picked up a foreign language to elaborate or to explain or to depict their Indian society. And what do you think is could be the reason behind it? For example, Kalki Krishnamurti belongs to the southern part of the country, especially to be more specific, he belongs to Tamil Nadu, and it would have been easy for him to write in Tamil rather than choosing to write in English. But the reason he is choosing to write in English could be that he would get a greater platform for his audience, as his audience, and he would be able to talk about Indian society or this Indian social fabric to a audience which is not just restricted to a particular state, but which is of which is spread throughout the whole country. And not just that, English being one of the global languages, would also take his text or his fiction beyond the national boundaries also. So English then become one way of actually talking about many things. When these writers decide to write in a language which is not their own, first of all, they talk about the difficulties of writing in a foreign language. At the same time, they also use the same foreign language to depict their own society, but they also use this particular tool, English, a global language, to criticize the nature of this global language, of this foreign language, the status of this foreign language that it has you know it has gained, especially uh, after the independence. English, as you know, has not been our own original language. It had been introduced to us by our colonizers, and they had a very clear agenda of introducing English. They wanted people to be educated in this particular language because they wanted Indians to work as their subordinates. So it would have been much more easier for them to have a generation of Indians who would know English, who would understand English, who would write and read English well, so that they could work as clerical staff for the English officers, and to a very large extent their aim was to a certain, I mean, I would say yes, to a very large extent the aim was fulfilled also. We have had a generation of people who have emerged, as English speakers and as English, as those who understand English or those who comprehend English well. But at the same time, the introduction of English language in Indian society has also affected the Indian social fabric a lot. It was not just the introduction of a language that has made or break a particular society, but along with this particular language also came the whole lot of literature in English. And not just that, there was also a whole lot of different set of values that got introduced into Indian society. Now, it had actually started affecting the Indian social fabric. It had started affecting the Indian traditions, not always in a negative way, to a certain extent. Well, it depends upon the perspective of the person or the writer, but these writers are very much interested in talking about how Englishness, or how English as a language and also as a culture, was affecting the Indian culture. In one of the earlier chapters that you had read in class 11th, Ranga's marriage, uh, that is also, of course, an example of Indian English fiction. But more importantly, there also the writer talks about how is it that there was this generation of youngsters who were coming up with different sets of ideas on marriage, but ultimately succumbing before the Indian traditions. So there, the writer uses English in a very beautiful way. He uses this particular tool to express his imagination in the form of a story. He not just criticizes Indian social traditions of of love, sorry, of arranged marriages, wherein the consent of women is still not important, where women are given severely a secondary status in society. So he criticizes Indian society, as well as he also criticizes English language, English traditions and culture, which have paved way into Indian societies. And thereby, there is whole lot of youngsters who are neither Indians properly now, or nor they are properly English men. So we are somewhere into a scenario where we did not have a very clear identity of our own, whether we were truly Indians or we were truly English. So there came up a hybrid generation then, which was educated in English and to a certain extent confused about their lives, about the moral systems, because the education had given them a different set of values with which they were trying to frame their new identities, I must say. Well, that was Ranga's marriage. But in this particular chapter, Tiger King, also you find Kalki Krishnamurti writing in English. And not just that, he also, to a certain extent, I feel, at a certain level, he also criticizes the Englishness of this particular king. So this particular story is about a king, and this king is of a kingdom, Pratibandhapuram. So this story is set in pre-independent time, where India was still into the system of princely states, where there used to be princes who used to govern a small piece of land as their princes, and they had complete authority over that particular piece of land. And how was their life, and how interested they were in administrating, and how much was their contribution in building India, is something which is discussed not directly, but in a very indirect forms. So in this particular story, you find that there is this Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram, where variety of names have been given to him, that he is Maharaja, Jang Jang Bahadur, and variety of names. Please refer to the first particular paragraph of the story, where lot many names are given. In fact, one name is M.A.D, mad also. So we do not know what does it stand for, but you can find that it could actually be comment on his intellectual capacities, calling him mad. And when you start reading the story, you find that there is this satiric undertones in the narrative. And not just that, there is a very high use of irony throughout the story, which makes it humorous, entertaining, and at the same time critical also. So I'll just try to begin with the story and try to deal with the issues as and when they appear in the story. So right in the first particular sentence itself, I find there is a big irony, because the first sentence says that this particular story is about a king. The Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram is the hero of this story. This is how the sentence begins. Now, if you have read the whole story, you know that this particular king of Pratibandhapuram, or the protagonist, is far from being a hero. He could be anybody else than a hero. We're not calling him a villain, we're not calling him a negative character, but should we call him a hero? Please keep this question in mind. If you have not read the story, if you've already read the story, then you need to assess it in your mind. So I find this completely ironic, because at least I do not find this particular person, or the Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram, as king, as sorry, as not the king, but as a hero, because a hero has got certain characteristic features which at least this king does not have. Okay, so when he is born, then some extraordinary things happen, and he's just 10 days old. He starts putting up extremely intelligent questions to the astrologers, and as you can imagine, when a prince is born, it was definitely a matter of lot of pride and celebration for everybody. And there is this royal astrologer who talks about how he's going to die, and then just the 10-day-old prince starts speaking, and he says about ask about his manner of death, and the manner of death is going to be that he will be killed by a tiger. This is the big story of his birth. Okay, so you find him that uh, uh, the author right in the beginning says that this story will talk to you about, or will narrate the extraordinary death of the king. And once again, I would say, if you know the story, you know that the king dies in a most ordinary manner, and there is nothing extraordinary. He doesn't die in a war, he doesn't die fighting with enemies, he doesn't die saving his kingdom or his people, but he died in a very basic manner. And it could be a death of any ordinary person. So once again, I find that there is this whole lot of irony, which is meant to induce some fun and humor and also entertainment, and at the same time it is also meant to question the whole concept of heroism. We need to know who real hero is, and should we arbitrarily call these royal characters as hero. It is also a comment on a practice of a whole lot of narrative that is present about the description of the variety of kings that we had during the times of princely states system in our country. Actually, these kings had their own they had their own writers, and they were actually these writers or poets or these literary people, they were patronized by the king. Okay, so of course, if they are getting any favor from the king, in return they had to return back the favor by giving an extraordinary character sketch of that particular king. So they used to have their private authors, they used to have their private writers, and writers used to write too highly of these kings. There is a lot of literature that is actually available to us, wherein there would be the description of the king, and they would be described in the most divine and the extraordinary manner, right, beginning from their physical appearances to their conduct, their behavior, their learnings, their capacities, intellectuals or physical, and up till whatever, covering each and every aspect of their life. They would be shown not just as hero, but somebody who is just divinely endowed with lots and lots of powers. Okay, so if you have any information about Prithviraj Raso, which is written by Chandra Bardai, and it is about the great famous Rajputana king Prithviraj the third, who was the last Hindu ruler of the kingdom of Delhi. When you read this particular account, Prithviraj Raso, you then once again find that he's been described in really really superhuman manner. Some of it could be true, but 100% of it could never be true. And in fact, they are just too much of fancy and imagination that has been involved. So I feel that when you read this particular story, Kalki is actually making a comment on that practice of presenting their kings in the most extraordinary manners, and just making them something which is just larger than life and larger than human being figure. So he puts a comment on that also, because he says that I'm going to tell you the story of a king who died in the most extraordinary manner. And when you read at the end of the story, how was it that they were able to he was able to he was not able to save his life, and he died in a most ordinary manner. Then you find about, you start questioning the whole lot of stories that float around us about these princely states and these rulers. Anyway, moving on. Then there is this, as I told you, the beginning of the chapter is about his birth and about how he started talking. But when you complete part one of the story is divided into various parts. As the first part ends, you find that is on page number 10. If you go to page number 10, then he says the last lines of the end of the part one states, and I quote, "This account is only a rumor rife in Pratibandhapuram, but with hindsight, we may conclude it was based on some truth." Unquote. So what he's saying is that, I am telling you about this story of a 10-year-old child who started speaking, but then this is just a rumor, but to a certain extent there could be some truth also in it. Okay, so now you can imagine. So he is very clearly admitting that he is using a lot of imagination in building up this story of this little boy, or who then turns out to be the king of Pratibandhapura. But at the same time, he's also saying that there's some truth in it. So what could be the truth? The truth element could be the astrology and the predictions. Of course, that could be truth, because that is very much a practice in Indian society. But what could be the element of imagination? The element of imagination is that the 10-year-old boy started speaking. Okay, so this is how you need to understand. That's what I said. It's actually a comment. It's a comment on those writers who used to write too highly of these kings. He is very clearly hinting that there is this exaggerated use of imagination and fancy, which was actually put in use by these writers to make their patronizers look greater than life figures. Okay, then moving on. In part 2, you find that, it begins with the childhood of the king, Tiger King. And then when you read the description, it talks about how he only drank the milk of English cows, he watched only English movies, and there is just he was being looked after by an English nanny, and there is just too much of Englishness in his growing up. So once again, you are, as a reader, required to question, or at least required to think about it. How much of Indianness is there in this particular king, who actually belongs to the Indian land? Uh, there, right from his childhood, all aspects of his upbringing are basically English in nature. So we are forced to question if he is really Indian, if he has some knowledge and information about his Indian land and culture and traditions, and if he is growing up in the English manner, how much would he actually feel connected or belonged to his own motherland? That is one thing. Second important thing is that, as I told you, the story is set in pre-independent times. These are also the times when India was about to get, it was very near to getting its freedom from the colonizers. So therefore it is the time when there are people who are actually convinced that English way of life or learning English was a better way than being Indian. Or probably they found it a little shameful not to know English, or not to know the etiquettes that were the part of the English way of life. So there is once again a question of how much pride do they take in being an Indian. Okay, so this is also what Indian English fiction is doing. It is trying to tell you the changing Indian social fabric. As I told you, the Englishness was introduced into Indian society, and it was not just the language that had come in, but a whole lot of moral systems had come inside. And people, and in fact these responsible people, the princes and the kings, who should have been the epitome of Indianness, were actually following the the English values and English way of life, right? Then, at the age of at a very young age, probably at a very young age, he shoots first tiger, and he's very happy. He goes to the astrologer, the same royal astrologer, and he says that he has killed the a tiger, and now probably he could be free of the danger that has been lurking on his life. And then the astrologer says that it's not possible, he has to kill. He might kill 99 tigers in the same manner, that the danger comes from the 100th tiger, because if he doesn't kill the 100th tiger, then that the 100th tiger will become the reason of his death. Now from that time onwards, there is only one thing that becomes that stays very important in the life of the king, is to kill tigers, and his all focus energy goes into devising variety of ways and methods of killing somehow 100 tigers. And as the story progresses, you say that he doesn't really take much interest in administration, and there's hardly any incident which tells us about how was it that he was linked with his own people. Nowhere in the story do we get this reference whether he has been actually looking after the people. The probably Mora has been uh, had been performing the duties of being a king of Pratibandhupuram, but all he is concerned about is somehow killing those 99 or 100 tigers. Okay, so then there is this reference of how the on the part 3, the part third of the story, that is on page number 11, somewhere in the middle of the page you find that, and I am quoting from the textbook. Quote, from that day onwards, it was celebration time for all the tigers inhabiting Pratibandhupuram. Unquote. Now, this is the beginning of the third part of the story. This I also find very ironic, because it's a celebration time for India, for the tigers in Pratibandhupuram, because actually the king or the Maharaja had put a ban in the state that no one else apart from him is allowed to kill tigers or hunt tigers. Nobody of any status or of any social order was actually allowed to given permission to hunt tigers. It was not possible for anybody else to do that except for Maharajas himself. That is why he's saying that now the tigers had could celebrate, because their life was only could be taken by Maharaja and not by anyone else. I find it ironic, because they would still be waiting for their death, but only thing is that it they would be killed by Maharaja and by nobody else. So it's not the time for celebration. It's just that their death would only be taken away by Maharaja, right? So this is how he's putting the language to use. Look at the way he's using the language, and he's trying to tell you, he's trying to induce this humor element into the story, and then trying to knock you at he's knocking at your critical abilities. Please think about what he's trying to say. He's saying about, see, a tiger has all the reason to celebrate, because he's going to be killed by a king and not by somebody else. So definitely killing or death is not something uh, which needs to be celebrated, but here we are just trying to show the pride of a king who feels that he is actually giving salvation to the tiger by killing them. Anyway, let us move on. Then he says that in the further part of the story, we find that there is this British officer who was very much interested in hunting the tigers, and not just that, he was very much interested in getting himself photographed with the carcass or the dead body of the tiger with one leg over it. And you would have seen it. Just try visiting some of the palaces of Rajasthan if possible. I've been through many palaces, but just to give you an example, the famous Jodhpur palace. Uh, if you go there, I don't know if it's still open for the visitations by the people, but earlier when you go there, so the first thing that you see is that there is this Maharaja who is like any other ordinary middle-aged pot-bellied person with a gun in his hand, and then there is this skin of the tiger over one of his leg would be over the skin of the tiger, and then he would be standing there very proudly getting photographed. So it was not actually a photo, I think it's a painting. So it is very much available in the very first room of the palace, which they actually take you into. And this is the Jodhpur Palace. If you have been there, please, if you ever have a time, please go there and do visit Jodhpur Palace. It's worth visiting. What I'm trying to get at is that this was a very common practice of not just Indian princes, but of many powerful people of the world. They have just taken pride in killing animal, tiger, because tiger is supposed to be one of the most ferocious tiger of this planet, of a ferocious animal of this planet. So killing a tiger will definitely give them a sense of lot of power and of pride, which is very deeply and very very starkly been criticized and targeted by Kalki here. They're saying that this is what the human pride depends upon. It depends upon killing an innocent and armless animal, because when a person kill a human being hunt, they have a gun, but tigers have no guns or no other arms to defend them, right? So there is this British officer who is very fond of killing and then hunting and then getting photographed, and then but then Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram does not allow him to do so. He says that it's not possible, he will not allow. And of course there is this at certain level, the British officer sent a threat that if he does not allow him to do that, then of course he will lose his kingdom. So now to save his kingdom, he sent many diamond rings to the ladies of the British officers, believing that the ladies will take two or three out of it. There were approximately 50 that he sent. But the ladies, the British officer ladies, they keep all the diamond ring, and which cost him approximately 3 lakhs rupees. Now 3 lakhs rupees in a pre-independent India is a huge amount. It's a big amount. So but then you find this Maharaja feeling relaxed at the fact that even if he had lost 3 lakhs rupees, he has at least been able to take care of his throne. Now what you need to understand here is that first thing that is coming up, of course, is of the human pride, which is dependent upon killing innocent people. Apart from that, you find that these kings, these princes, extremely powerless in their own country, so they could very easily be put under threat, especially this particular king. Even if we are not to comment upon the nature of the power of different other kings, at least this particular king could be very easily put under threat by British officer. And then he does not have any other military means to safeguard his kingdom. He has to kind of bargain his own freedom by offering him a lot of money actually. Okay, so you need to think about, is he really a hero of the story? Because the chapter began that this story is about the hero of Pratibandhapuram, who died in a most extraordinary manner. Now think, do you really think that these are the features of a hero? A hero who bargains his own throne, power and freedom from a British officer instead of fighting with him, or if even if not fighting that, then there could have been a different ways of bargaining, or of coming to terms, or to coming to a reconciliation. But then he's not doing that. He's actually paying money and trying to buy his own freedom. So then once he is done with all the tigers of the forest of Pratibandhapuram, he has still completed only 70. How many more does he has to kill? 30 more. Now, since there were no more tigers present in his own kingdom, he decides to get married to a girl whose father would have a big kingdom, lots of forest and tigers in it. So even his, idea of marriage or decision of getting married is dependent upon his obsession to kill the tigers. So this obsession of kill tigers is something which has actually overwhelmed his whole life. It has overtaken his whole life. You will seem to have this person in front of who doesn't have any other concern other than just killing tigers, and it has actually started leading to the extinction of tigers right at that time. In his own kingdom he doesn't find any tiger. Now he has to move on to different forest areas and to different kingdoms. That's why he decides to get married. So extinction of tiger, which is a big problem for us today in 21st century, has not just been a problem which is of recent nature. This has been a very long problem, and we have been facing it from pre-independent days. So this issue of extinction of animals due to human nature or due to human pride is something which is as valid today, or probably more valid today, as it was somewhere in 1940s or before that, right? So throughout these many years, the government probably has not been able to do so much to save the lives of these tigers, because now they're just countable tigers that we have in our country. So then, apart from that, he decides to get married. As I said, so he marries a girl whose father has got a big kingdom, and then there are lots of tiger who have been hunted by this by the Maharaja of Pratibandhupuram, and he has killed approximately 99 tigers. One more tiger needs to be killed, but then he is not able to find that one tiger either in his in-laws forest or in his own. So then he starts getting frustrated because 99 were completed. If he just kill one more, then his this whole purpose of living, probably the whole purpose of his life of killing 100 tiger and somehow getting through with this prediction of him getting killed by the tiger would at least be over, and he would be able to live his life peacefully. He's not able to do it. There's this frustration that grows inside him, and he starts taking very unsettling kind of decisions, wherein he starts firing people out of their jobs, and then he starts putting double taxes on the people, and his divan, or who is his main minister, tries to caution him about his decision and says that if he continues to do that, then there will be the discontentment will grow among the people, and the land will go under the hands of INC, Indian National Congress. Now, at this junction, you must understand that this is the historical point which has been mentioned in the story, where the unification of the country was actually becoming the vision of Indian National Congress, which was one of the most important political party and had played a very vital role in India getting its freedom. So now it was actually thinking of dissolving all these small princely states and trying to bring the government of trying to bring the complete country, the whole nation of India, under one unified central government of India. So he says that if the Diwan cautions him, the king, about the fact that if he continues to ignore administrational issues and if he continues to uh, take wrong decisions for the people, then their discontentment may rise up. It may take a form of a rebellion, and then Indian National Congress may just take away their kingdom, and it would come under the unified uh, structure of Indian society. But then he's just not ready to listen, and he wants him of he wants the divan of fire getting fired from his job, and then he says that he is just wanting to kill his last tiger, come what may. Therefore divan takes a decision. The decision is somehow to bring that one last tiger from somewhere. So he arranges one tiger, and this tiger is brought from People's Park, Madras, which means it could be a zoo. In today's language, it could be a zoo. So it's a very old, tired tiger which has been brought from a zoo, so that the king could kill and would feel pacified, and then people would also have a better life, because the decisions that the king was taking continue to take, it was making the life of the people hell. And not just that, actually it could be very adverse for kingdom and for the king also. Therefore this uh, old tiger has been brought from People's Park, Madras, and you should read that particular description, where how is it that this big old tiger is first stuffed into the car by Divan and his wife, and then he's just taken out, forcefully is taken out of the car, and then he is just asked to sit over there. I mean, he's just sitting over at a place, and then the king is informed that they found a tiger, and then king comes all ready up with his gun and everything, and he kills the tiger. He shoots at the tiger, but then the king has actually missed its target. The tiger, being very old, could not run away, and the king, who's supposedly the hero of this story, could not understand how come a particular tiger or animal could just sit there waiting to be killed. Any little an organism might be the littlest of organism would try to save its own life by a very apparent danger right in front of them. But the king does not understand, or he fails to recognize the very clear slumber or very clear laziness of the king, of the tiger, who is just sitting there as if he was sitting there to waiting to be killed. He doesn't understand that it couldn't this something is wrong with this particular tiger. Why isn't he trying to run away? Why is he not trying to save its own life? So but he is just so blinded by his desire to kill the tiger, he just ignores all these things, and he just kill it. And but he feels he has killed, but then the tiger, being very old, he actually faints by the loud report that is made by the bullet. And the bullet just very closely passes by the tiger, so it just gets fainted after. And then king, feeling very happy that he has killed, and the 100 tiger, he moves away. It was only after he has gone away that Diwan and other hunters realized that tiger has not been killed, it was just fainted. Now if they would have told same thing to the king, then once again the search of the king would have begun, and it would have put everybody in a big problem again. So they decides to kill the tiger. All of them, they decide to kill the tiger. They kill the tiger, and king, very happily feeling and very pridefully, he conducts a procession in the whole kingdom, where the body of the king, the tiger, is being carried out, and it's been put on public display for everybody. And then it's been buried. The body of the tiger is buried with a tomb being erected over it as a symbol of king's victory, which would be there for eternal. So this is the story of how he just kills 99 tiger. In reality, he has killed only 99 tigers, not. But then readers know it, Diwan know it, other hunters know it. The Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram, he does not know it, and he is feeling very happy. And for the first time in this story, we've been told that he takes some interest in his life also. So it's son's birthday, and he's trying to buy a gift. So he buys a wooden tiger for his son, and this wooden tiger has been designed by a very unskilled carpenter. He takes uh, the wooden tiger for free. He doesn't offer any money to the carpenter, which again tells you and give you some kind of look through into his character about how he very easily uses his power, rather misuses his power, ignoring the labor of his own people. So he takes away the king, he takes away, the king takes away that wooden tiger. And as he was playing with it, it was made by an unskilled carpenter. As I told you, there were these small pieces or slivers of wood which are coming out, and one of it gets pierced in his right hand. So he just removes that sliver, and he continues to play, and he ignores the infection that has been made into his hand. So next day the infection gets very prominent, and it started spreading in the other part of the bodies also. So he feels unwell. There are three surgeons who are brought from a different part of the country to give him medical treatment, and then they decide. I mean, if you read the ending of the story, it is as if they're deciding, the consent, they decide that the king should be operated. You are inclined to think that for a simple infection with a wood in a hand, why would one is needed to be operated upon? And there are clear indication of how these three surgeons actually did came to this particular conclusion by sitting together and by a common consent. So we don't find all this very natural. There is something definitely fishy in this particular situation, because when the operation gets over, the Maharaja is dead in this operation. He's not able to recover from that particular infection, and the doctors say that operation has been successful. Maharaja is dead. So how is it that he's calling the operation successful with Maharaja being dead? Okay, so you find that there is something unnatural about this whole story of calling the people from outside, and then they decided to, because we don't imagine people dying with just one infection. At the most, it could have been the taking away of that particular finger, or decapitating that finger from the body. But death out of that infection seems to be a far-fetched and a very impossible idea. So, and more so because they are not unhappy with the fact that Maharaja is dead. They're in fact kind of celebrating in a very lower tone. They're celebrating that Maharaja is dead because they did not want a person of his nature to be that Maharaja anymore, because he has never been good to his own people. He has never been useful as a king to his own kingdom. He has never been good in administration, let alone being good. He has never attended any administration matters. It seems as if his whole life was just obsessed with the killing of the tigers, which is something which had actually given a feeling of discontentment among his own people, and they just wanted to get rid of this kind of Maharaja. So this came up as a good opportunity of you know of getting rid of him. And probably this was, probably it has not been clearly mentioned, but there are many things which are not been clearly mentioned in the story, so you need to depend upon our own interpretations about this. So what do you feel? I feel that this death of Maharaja was deliberate. It was a part of a plan which was collectively made by the surgeons and by the ministers. What do you feel? You have to depend upon your interpretations of the story. Okay, so this is how the Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram died in a most extraordinary manner. So, as he had told me right in the beginning, the author had told us right in the beginning, is a story of a hero who died in an extraordinary death. Think about both. Do you think this death was of extraordinary manner? Well, to a certain extent, yes, because people don't die with a wooden infection. Death is definitely not possible with just one wooden sliver getting pierced into body. So in that way, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary because the death is, I personally feel the death is very purely manipulated. It has been contrived death. It was not a natural death. So in that way, it could be called extraordinary. But then it could be called extraordinary because it should not be actually seen as a very extraordinary death, because any ordinary human being can die with this kind of infection if that person has to die. So, infections into your body are very common, and you don't really need to be born with some avatar or have a royal tag on your forehead to die with such death. So, therefore, death was very extremely ordinary, but yet extraordinary because it was contrived by people and it was not a natural death. So, it was as if everybody was against him, and the death was. Um, that was one good way of getting rid of him. So now when you read this particular story, please keep all these things in mind and try to see if you're able to understand it in this way. So that is why I said there is a very innate satire here. There is a satire on Englishness, there is a satire on princes, there is a satire on how human pride is based upon killing animals. There is a satire on on Indian society also, which was very much in transformation. It was getting changed, and it was getting changed for a good reason or for a bad reason is something that we need to think for ourselves. So author is not giving you any conclusions like a very good literary writer. He is just telling you the situations. He is giving you a variety of situations and incidents and events. You as a reader have to decide or interpret about what is it that Indian society was being through at that time, right? Do you feel that this Englishness was doing anything good for society, or has it done anything good? Because we are now approximately 80 years ahead of the time which has been talked about in the story. So do you think this Englishness has been of any good to us, or do you feel that you also view this English way of life, which has become now very much an inevitable part of Indian society, as something which has brought anything positive in our life? So that's what he's trying to tell you. And there's one more thing. I find a lot of apprehensions that Indian English writers were facing at that time, because they knew what India was heading towards, or probably they did not know what India was heading towards, and that is why their apprehension gets expressed in their stories in the way in Ranga's marriage you saw, and then in this particular story Tiger King you're saying. So whenever you read this particular Indian English story, this particular story or any other fiction, please try to understand the perspective that the author is trying to express. This is very important. So please read the story, come up with questions, difficulties, any kind of confusions. All these questions are welcome. I'll definitely be more than happy to answer them. and read the story once again if you have read it already, and if you have not read it, please read it. I hope you have a nice time reading the story. Thank you so much, and I hope all of you are enjoying this time and all of you are staying within your homes. So stay within your homes, stay safe, and uh, study well, and improve your skills. Thank you so much.